The already complex relationship between India and Ukraine has entered a new phase of strain. This recent downturn was triggered by Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's public endorsement of a controversial American policy. He backed the idea of imposing tariffs on countries that continue to engage in significant trade with Russia, particularly in the energy sector. In an interview, President Zelensky described punitive measures against nations purchasing Russian oil and gas as a correct idea. He argued that such trade provides Moscow with the financial resources needed to prolong its war effort, and therefore, countries enabling this should face economic consequences. This statement has direct implications for India, which has significantly increased its procurement of discounted Russian crude oil since the conflict began. The timing of President Zelensky's comments is particularly noteworthy, adding to the geopolitical complexity of the situation. His statement came shortly after the Trump administration in the United States announced a new 25% punitive tariff on Indian exports. This measure was explicitly linked to India's continued energy trade with Russia, effectively raising the total U.S. tariff on affected Indian goods to a substantial 50%. This action by Washington, and Zelensky's subsequent support for it, places New Delhi in a difficult diplomatic position. It is caught between its long-standing strategic partnership with Russia and its growing ties with the United States and other Western nations. The situation is further complicated by the fact that Zelensky's statement followed Prime Minister Narendra Modi's high-profile meetings with Russian President Vladimir Putin during the recent Shanghai Cooperation Organization summit. The economic stakes for India are considerable. According to data from the Center for Research on Energy and Clean Air, India, alongside China, has become one of the largest importers of Russian fossil fuels since the war's outbreak. This trade has reportedly generated immense revenue for Moscow, estimated to be around $985 billion. For India, access to discounted Russian oil has been crucial for managing domestic inflation and ensuring energy security at a time of volatile global prices. The imposition of steep U.S. tariffs threatens to disrupt this arrangement. The potential financial losses from these tariffs on Indian exports to the U.S. could undermine the economic benefits gained from purchasing cheaper Russian oil, creating a challenging economic and foreign policy dilemma for Indian policymakers. India's official stance has been one of balancing its national interests while calling for a peaceful resolution to the conflict. New Delhi has consistently maintained that its energy purchases are dictated by its own sovereign needs and are essential for the well-being of its population. While there has been no direct official rebuttal to President Zelensky's specific comments, the Indian government has previously termed the U.S. tariffs as unjust and impractical. In diplomatic engagements, including recent phone calls between Prime Minister Modi and President Zelensky in August 2025, India has reiterated its commitment to dialogue and diplomacy as the only path to peace. This careful balancing act highlights India's effort to maintain its strategic autonomy while navigating the increasing pressures from both sides of the global conflict. The current unease in India-Ukraine relations is not an isolated event, but is rooted in a history of divergent foreign policy stances on issues critical to India's national security. A significant point of friction dates back to 1998, a landmark year for India's strategic program. When India conducted a series of nuclear tests, known as Pokhran-2, it declared itself a nuclear weapons state. This move was met with widespread international condemnation and sanctions. Ukraine at that time sided with the international consensus against India. It voted in favor of United Nations resolutions that sought to impose sanctions on India, a position that New Delhi viewed as unsupportive of its security compulsions. This historical episode created a foundational layer of mistrust in the bilateral relationship. This pattern of discord continued over 2 decades later on another issue of immense sensitivity for India, the status of Jammu and Kashmir. In August 2019, the Indian government abrogated Article 370 of its constitution, a move that revoked the special autonomous status of the region and integrated it more fully into the Indian Union. This decision was met with strong opposition from Pakistan, which sought to internationalize the issue. During this period, under President Zelensky's leadership, Ukraine aligned itself with voices calling for international oversight. Kyiv supported the idea of international intervention or mediation in Kashmir, a stance that directly contradicted India's long-held position that Kashmir is a purely internal matter, and all disputes should be resolved bilaterally with Pakistan, without third-party involvement. These historical disagreements have shaped the perception of Ukraine within India's strategic community. From New Delhi's perspective, Kyiv has, on multiple occasions, failed to show sensitivity to India's core security interests. Whether it was on the nuclear issue or the Kashmir dispute, Ukraine's positions were seen as aligning with international blocs that were critical of India. This history makes it harder for India to view Ukraine's current appeals for support through a purely sympathetic lens. The memory of these past frictions informs India's present-day calculus, contributing to a more transactional and cautious approach rather than one based on shared values or a deep-seated strategic alignment with Kyiv. Consequently, while India has expressed sympathy for the plight of the Ukrainian people and provided humanitarian aid, its diplomatic and strategic actions have remained carefully calibrated. India has abstained from several United Nations resolutions condemning Russia's actions, choosing a path of neutrality. This stance is not just about preserving its relationship with Moscow, it is also influenced by the lack of historical reciprocity from Kyiv on matters of vital national importance to India. The current tensions over oil trade, therefore, are being viewed in New Delhi not just as a new problem, but as the latest chapter in a long and often difficult bilateral history. A significant and persistent irritant in the India-Ukraine relationship has been Kyiv's long-standing and robust defense partnership with Pakistan, India's primary regional adversary. This military cooperation is not a recent development but a decades-long engagement that has directly impacted the security balance in South Asia. According to data compiled by the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, between 1991 and 2020, Ukraine exported approximately $1.6 billion worth of military hardware to Pakistan. This extensive arms trade has provided the Pakistani military with critical capabilities, a fact that has always been a major concern for Indian defense planners and has cast a long shadow over bilateral ties with Ukraine. The most notable of these defense deals was the sale of 320 T-80UD main battle tanks to the Pakistan Army in the late 1990s. This landmark agreement was crucial not only for Pakistan's military modernization, but also for Ukraine's defense industry. It is widely credited with having saved the Kharkiv-Malishev tank factory from bankruptcy at a critical time. For India, however, the influx of these advanced tanks into Pakistan's arsenal represented a significant security challenge. The T-80UDs bolstered Pakistan's conventional military strength along its border with India, forcing the Indian Army to recalibrate its own armored warfare doctrines and procurement plans in response to this new threat. This defense relationship did not end with the tank deal. It has continued with various other agreements over the years, further solidifying the military-technical bond between Kyiv and Islamabad. For instance, in December 2008, Pakistan procured 4 Il-78 mid-air refueling aircraft from Ukraine, enhancing the operational range and endurance of the Pakistan Air Force. More recently, even after the conflict with Russia began, these ties have been maintained. In June 2020, an agreement was signed to upgrade the same Il-78 tanker aircraft. Furthermore, in February 2021, a contract worth $85.6 million was finalized for the repair and overhaul of Pakistan's T-80UD tank fleet, demonstrating the enduring nature of this defense partnership. From India's perspective, this continuous supply of military equipment and technology to Pakistan is fundamentally problematic. It is seen as a direct contradiction to Ukraine's appeals for solidarity and support from India. Indian policymakers question how a country that actively arms a hostile neighbor can simultaneously expect New Delhi to abandon its own time-tested strategic partnerships, particularly with Russia. This Pakistan factor serves as a major impediment to building deeper trust and strategic convergence between India and Ukraine. It reinforces the perception in New Delhi that Ukraine's foreign policy choices have often disregarded India's security sensitivities, making it difficult for India to make significant policy shifts in Kyiv's favor. In the face of mounting pressure from both the US and Ukraine, India has charted a course that prioritizes its own national interests while trying to maintain open channels of communication with all parties. The official Indian response to the US tariffs and Zelensky's comments has been firm but measured. New Delhi has labeled the tariffs as unfair, and has asserted its sovereign right to make decisions on energy procurement based on its economic needs. This stance underscores a fundamental principle of India's foreign policy: strategic autonomy. India has resisted being drawn into an either-or choice, signaling that it will continue to engage with Russia to secure its energy and defense requirements, regardless of external pressures. Simultaneously, India has not closed the door on diplomacy with Ukraine. Prime Minister Modi's recent telephone conversations with President Zelensky are indicative of this continued engagement. In these talks, India has consistently advocated for a cessation of hostilities and a return to the path of dialogue and diplomacy. By offering to play a constructive role in peace efforts, India seeks to position itself as a responsible global actor and a potential bridge between the warring factions rather than a party to the conflict. This approach allows India to maintain its neutral stance while addressing humanitarian concerns and demonstrating a commitment to international peace and stability, albeit on its own terms. The future of India-Ukraine relations will likely be complex and transactional. The recent events have reinforced the existing fault lines, and a deep strategic partnership seems unlikely in the near term. The relationship will probably be defined by a pragmatic, issue-based approach rather than a comprehensive alignment. For ties to improve significantly, there would need to be a fundamental shift in Ukraine's understanding of India's strategic compulsions, including its relationship with Russia and its security concerns regarding Pakistan. Without a greater appreciation for these sensitivities from Kyiv, the relationship is likely to remain formal and somewhat distant, limited primarily to areas of mutual but non-strategic interest. Ultimately, India's path forward will be guided by a careful cost-benefit analysis. It will weigh the economic advantages of Russian energy against the potential costs of Western sanctions and tariffs. It will balance its historical and strategic ties with Moscow against the growing importance of its partnerships with the US and Europe. President Zelensky's recent statements, combined with Ukraine's historical policy stances, have made this balancing act more challenging. However, they have also reinforced New Delhi's conviction that its foreign policy must be anchored firmly in its own national interests, navigating the turbulent waters of global geopolitics with caution, independence, and a clear focus on its long-term strategic goals.